supplies do you really need to get started with milking dairy goats? Today we're going over the milking supplies I swear by after nearly a decade of milking goats. If we haven't met before, hi, I'm Sarah from the Nest in the West. I'm a homeschool mom to 4, a small-scale flower farmer. I keep mini Nubian dairy goats, and I teach homesteaders holistic goat care and goat milk cheese making in my online courses and my membership, the Dairy Goat Collective. Now, I prefer a simple setup when it comes to things like this. Milking dairy goats does not have to be high tech, and it doesn't really require any super special equipment. However, there are definitely some helpful tools you can use to make the process easier and help keep your milk tasting its best. Okay, first of all, you are going to need a milk stand. Now, we have 3 different styles of milk stands. I like to keep 3 because I tend to milk 3 goats at a time. I do hand milk my goats, but I like to get them all up on the stand at once and then move from goat to goat just to keep things moving along a little bit faster. So we have multiple different styles, and honestly, they all work great. My absolute favorite is the one that my husband made from scrap wood and a pallet. I like that it's nice and wide so I can sit on the stand next to my goat as I milk. If you have a first freshener or a goat that likes to give you a little bit of trouble and maybe kick, it's nice to have a side wall to your milk stand so that you can hobble her or make sure she can't jump off the edge. But essentially all you really need in a milk stand is a head gate to keep the goat secure and a place to put her feed. Next up is a stainless steel milking pail. Now, you could use a stainless steel bowl, you could use something else in your kitchen you already have on hand, or you can go and buy a designated milking pail. Whatever you do, I highly recommend that it is stainless steel, so that makes it really easy to clean and keep sanitary, and that it doesn't have any sort of lips around the edges that milk or other bacteria can kind of find places to hide and make it difficult to clean. I like a milk pail that can fit in my dishwasher because it keeps sanitizing it really simple. Make sure that whatever pail you use, it is short enough to fit under your specific dairy goat and her teats. It is the worst to be milking a goat and realize that your pail's just a little bit too tall, and so you have to kind of angle the pail or tilt your hands a certain way. I have a couple different styles of milk pails that I use regularly, but the one that is my favorite is this short one with a half moon lid. And I hate to break it to you, but I don't know where it's from. Everyone wants to know where I got this milk pail, and the reality is it was a hand-me-down from a friend who was getting out of dairy goats, and she's not quite sure where she got it from. I've scoured the internet and never found anything quite like it. But if you know where to get a milk pail like this, do me a favor and let me know in the comments. Okay, the next supply that I like to bring to the barn with me when I'm milking my goats is another pail full of some warm soapy water and some wash rags. You could also use baby wipes to wipe down your goat's udder, or I've seen people use like a wash spray and a rag or paper towels. Whatever method you choose, you just need to get the goat's udder nice and clean before you milk. Next up is a canning funnel or some other sort of funnel to get your milk into the jar without spilling it everywhere. You're also going to want something to strain the milk with. We often use disposable milk filters. These are designed specifically for filtering milk, and they do a really good job of keeping things out of your milk from hair and bits of hay to little clots or other things you might find if your goat is dealing with some health issues. If you don't want to use a disposable product, you could absolutely use cheesecloth. You just want to make sure you keep it really clean and sanitize it frequently with baking soda to avoid getting off flavors in your milk. I really don't recommend using something like a disposable coffee filter to filter your milk, just because those are really, really hard to keep totally clean, and they usually use plastic mesh to filter the milk, and plastic tends to harbor odors and bacteria, and the fine mesh actually really easily develops milk stone buildup, and that can lead to off flavors in your milk pretty quickly. Next up are glass jars. I filter all of our milk into glass jars. We have gallon jars. Some of these I've bought from Azure. Some of them are just big honey jars from our local apiary, but mostly we use half-gallon jars. You can find these from popular canning companies at your local Walmart or wherever you like to buy your canning supplies, but the best price I have found is actually from Azure. We tend to filter milk that we are going to be using for cheese making into gallon jars, and then milk that we're using for drinking or selling into half-gallon jars. We don't put our milk into anything besides glass or stainless steel, and I find that really helps to keep the flavor nice and fresh. Now, this next thing isn't necessarily a tool you can bring to the barn, but it is an important factor in keeping your milk tasting delicious, and that is a way to rapid chill your milk. Now, you might bring your milk straight from the barn and put it into the freezer. I see people using those stone ice cubes that are intended for alcoholic beverages. You could use something like that too. We like to bring an ice chest full of ice water out to the barn, and then I filter the milk into jars and put the jars directly into the ice water to start chilling as I'm finishing milking the other goats actually, and while I'm doing the rest of my barn chores. That way, by the time we get to the fridge at the end of all of our milking chores, the milk is already cooled down significantly, and so I just pop it in the fridge and it gets nice and cold really quickly. You can put your jars in the freezer to chill for an hour or so before moving them to the fridge. However, I can't tell you how many jars I have accidentally broken using this method, and so unless you are a far more disciplined person than me, I don't recommend it. So those are the top supplies that I bring to the barn for milking. Another thing that's really nice to have that isn't necessarily a tool, is more of a space, is a place to keep your goats before and after you milk them, so that they're not able to get to the milk stand or get into things when you don't want them to. We just have a stall where we feed our goats their hay, and they sort of stay in that holding area, and I bring them out a few at a time to milk and then put them back in there so that no one's mobbing the door or trying to steal grain from their neighbor. Now, here are a few things I don't think you necessarily need to milk goats. One is a strip cup. A strip cup is kind of nice to have, but honestly, just stripping directly onto the milk stand does a pretty good job of showing you what's going on inside your goat's udder. I just find it an unnecessary extra piece of equipment, and so we don't use it anymore. Also, in my opinion, you don't need a teat dip. Washing the udder is really sufficient to get everything nice and clean before milking. Iodine is pretty drying on their skin and not really necessary to keep them clean or to keep them from getting mastitis. If your goats are nursing kids, the kids' saliva is actually antibacterial, and that serves as its own sort of teat dip. And if they're not nursing kids, as long as your goats stay standing for the next few minutes after milking, they should be fine. I find that goats, unlike cows, tend to stay standing and not go lay down in a pile of poop right after they've been milked. If you have a goat that seriously struggles with mastitis, you might consider something like a teat dip. But for most animals, I feel like it's really not necessary. Another thing that I know a lot of people do when they're milking, but we don't, is offer a really special snack on the milk stand. I know a lot of people like to do animal cookies or other just fun little treats for their goats, and I just don't do that. Maybe I'm not a fun goat owner, but it's one extra step, and so I don't do it. They do, however, get a nice high quality organic dairy goat grain ration, and we soak that in a bit of water and some apple cider vinegar or some yogurt whey, and they get that on the milk stand every day, and they are pretty happy about it, so I think it's a good trade-off. All right, so those are my basic must-haves for milking my dairy goats. I like to keep things simple, and so this is the setup I found that keeps milking efficient and enjoyable without too much fuss. If you found this video helpful, I'd love for you to stick around and subscribe for more goat milk and cheese making content. And if you're ready to go deeper, I'd love to support you on your dairy goat journey. The Dairy Goat Collective is my membership where homesteaders like you get ongoing guidance on holistic dairy goat care. Inside the membership, you'll find a vibrant community feed where you can ask questions, share wins, and connect with others. There's also an ever-growing library of classes, including Goat Cheese 101, all about making fresh and soft cheeses with goat milk, and the basics, which includes tutorials on all kinds of basic dairy goat care. There's also a library of holistic resources and protocols, monthly live Zoom chats, and a weekly private members-only podcast where I answer questions, share behind the scenes on my farm, and cover all kinds of dairy goat-related topics. I also regularly interview guest experts on the podcast, and I have a whole lineup of some really amazing experts on a variety of goat-related topics. If you want to learn more about holistic goat care, get support, and find your people, the Dairy Goat Collective might just be the place for you. Check out the link in the description to learn more. Thanks so much for watching, friends. I'm cheering you on in your goat journey, and I'll see you in the next video.